Welcome back to the Deep Dive. Today we are taking a deep exploration into the life of, well, one of the 20th century's most formidable cultural architects.
That's a great way to put it.
We're studying the woman who, really armed with a strategic vision and an almost unnerving ambition, built an entire national culture from the ground up.
And not just in one country. That's the key.
Right. Not just once, but twice in two very, very different nations. Our subject is Dame Ninette de Valois, born Edris Stannus, and she truly deserves the title of the godmother of English and Irish ballet.
Oh, that title is entirely earned. Because what our sources reveal is not the story of a great performer, though she was one. It's the history of a relentless, systematic campaign of institution building.
Institution building, that's the perfect phrase.
It is. De Valois didn't just, establish a successful dance company. She engineered a comprehensive, self-sustaining mechanism, a blueprint, really, for perpetually generating world-class talent, unique choreography, and an enduring artistic infrastructure.
So this deep dive is dedicated to extracting that blueprint, the specific, maybe even replicable strategy she used to completely revolutionize the art form.
Exactly.
And the scale of her legacy it's genuinely staggering. I mean, when we talk about Ninette de Valois, you are discussing the primary founder of what became the Royal Ballet.
Which is today one of the world's absolute foremost classical companies.
Absolutely. And also the Royal Ballet School and the major touring company that, eventually evolved into the Birmingham Royal Ballet.
And that's just the UK.
That's just the UK. But her influence, as we mentioned, didn't stop there. She was also the foundational force behind the establishment of the Turkish State Ballet.
So our mission today is
She achieved her greatest professional successes, her architectural successes, after having to step away from the intense demands of being a regular principal dancer. And pretty early in her career, too.
right. And this was because of a previously undiagnosed case of childhood polio. The damage from it was finally detected in 1924.
So the immediate critical question we face is, did that medical necessity, that forced pivot off the stage, did that ultimately enable her to become the institutional giant we remember?
Or was the blueprint already there, just sort of waiting for the opportunity to be activated? It's a great question.
Let's unpack this. We have to start at the very foundation, the dancer's origins and her transformation from Edris Stannus. So Edris Stannus was born on June 6, 1898, in Blessington, County Wicklow, Ireland. This was, of course, a time when Ireland was still wholly part of the United Kingdom.
And crucially, her background was not one of struggle. Not at all. It was one of gentry, of, high expectation.
Right. Her father was Lieutenant Colonel Thomas Stannus, a decorated British Army officer. Her mother, Elizabeth Graydon Smith, was an accomplished glassmaker known professionally as Lilith Stannus.
This family environment it's more important than it might seem on the surface. The sources really show that she came from a lineage characterized by deep intellectual and political connection.
Can you elaborate on that a bit?
Sure. Her mother's family included the famous diarist Elizabeth Grant Smith as a great-grandmother and the Scottish politician John Peter Grant as a great-great-grandfather.
So this isn't just trivia?
No, not at all. This background, it seems, instilled a sense of rigorous discipline, social confidence, and a unique perspective on documentation and legacy. These are qualities that are absolutely essential for someone who would spend her life meticulously documenting and building institutions.
It provides the intellectual framework for an ambitious life, certainly. She moved from Ireland to England, specifically to Kent in 1905, to live with her grandmother. And it wasn't until age 10 in 1908 that she started attending formal ballet lessons.
Which, as you noted, by today's hyper-competitive standards, that's considered a relatively late start. But her trajectory it accelerated with astonishing speed.
That acceleration really speaks to a formidable, focused work ethic, doesn't it?
It does. By age 13, she was already transitioning from, recreational classes to professional training at the Leela Field Academy for Children. And it's right at this juncture that she executes this fascinating, definitive pivot away from her gentry identity.
She changes her name.
She changes her name to Ninette de Valois.
That decision to adopt a name that sounds, slightly French, slightly exotic, certainly more theatrical than Edris Stannus, that's a statement in itself, isn't it? It signals her full commitment to the stage.
It's a total transformation into a professional artist, absolutely. And the professional debut followed immediately. Using this new persona, Ninette de Valois, she secured a position as a principal dancer in a major West End pantomime at the Lyceum Theatre.
A principal dancer in London while still a teenager.
It's a truly massive early achievement. It signifies not just technical skill, but remarkable stage presence and dramatic ability.
And she didn't stop there. She dedicated herself to mastering the classical tradition, continuing her advanced studies under a triumvirate of the greatest names in classical ballet pedagogy at the time.
Eduardo Spinoza, Enrico Cecchetti, and Nicolas Legat.
What did that kind of training give her?
Well, this is perhaps the most critical foundation for her later architectural work. Think of it this way. These three men represented the absolute pinnacle and, crucially, three slightly different schools of classical training: French, Italian, and Russian.
So she didn't just train in one lineage.
No, she absorbed a multifaceted approach. This depth of understanding, allowing her to synthesize the best of each method, is precisely what she would later codify and refine into the British style taught at the Royal Ballet School. She wasn't building a copy, she was building a hybrid, robust enough to withstand the scrutiny of the world stage.
And this preparation led to a really important pre-Ballets Russes milestone. By 1919, at the age of 21, she cemented her early professional status by being appointed principal dancer of the Beecham Opera, the resident opera company at the Royal Opera House.
So she had achieved success, but the true masterclass was yet to come.
Precisely. That success qualified her for the next most crucial step in her education, which brings us to the 3 years that defined her entire future career trajectory.
The years that transformed the ambitious dancer into the organizational titan.
The single most formative chapter for de Valois, the director, was without a doubt her time spent with the Ballets Russes. She joined Serge Diaghilev's legendary company in 1923. And our sources confirm this experience was basically equivalent to attending the world's most intense, demanding, and visionary business school, just with a spectacular artistic overlay.
Diaghilev's company was. It was a laboratory of genius, but it was also one of chaos. She remained there for 3 rigorous years, performing all across Europe, and she rose quickly to the rank of soloist.
So she was creating original roles.
Yes. In signature works that are still celebrated today, things like Les Biches and Le Train Bleu, she was operating at the absolute cutting edge of modern art and technique.
She was clearly thriving as a performer on the world stage, traveling constantly. But she wasn't just performing, was she? We see an early glimmer of her future institutional role even then.
You're talking about Alicia Markova.
Exactly. She took on a mentorship role for the young Alicia Markova, who was just a child at the time. It was already showing this prodigious talent.
This detail is pivotal. It really is. It shows her instinct for talent development was innate. She wasn't focused solely on her own performance. She recognized the need to nurture the next generation, a trait that would define the longevity of her institutions.
And Markova, of course, went on to become a prima ballerina assoluta.
So de Valois was developing the stars of tomorrow, even while she herself was still performing.
But the real critical takeaway, the aha moment that illuminates the source of her later genius, it comes from her own testimony. Our sources repeatedly cite de Valois' own retrospective analysis.
Right, where she stated quite clearly that everything she knew about how to run a ballet company.
Everything, from logistics to repertoire balance, from financial structures to handling immense artistic personalities.
She learned it all entirely from working with Diaghilev.
This is the organizational blueprint laid bare.
It is, and we have to elaborate on what that truly meant. Diaghilev's company was internationally famous, but it was also incredibly financially precarious. It constantly had to innovate or die. So de Valois learned not just artistic excellence, but also practical management.
Like what, specifically?
Well, first, repertoire balance. Diaghilev masterfully balanced the shock of the new, Stravinsky, Picasso, avant-garde work with a core of established, bankable classics. De Valois would import this exact strategy.
Okay, that makes sense.
Then logistics. The company was a traveling circus, constantly touring across countries with huge sets and costumes. She learned the mechanics of international movement, contracts, and the company discipline necessary for survival.
And finances.
The third point. She witnessed the peril of relying solely on wealthy patrons. Diaghilev's model was high risk, high reward. She would later seek institutional, state support, the direct opposite of Diaghilev's sometimes chaotic private financing.
So she took the artistic blueprint and strategically corrected the administrative flaws.
That's a perfect way to put it.
Yeah.
She absorbed the vision, but rejected the instability.
And that need for stability became acutely personal with what we referred to as the forced pivot. In 1924, only a year into her Ballets Russes tenure, doctors finally detected residual damage caused by a previously undiagnosed case of childhood polio.
This was a seismic event. It meant she had to step back drastically from the sheer physical intensity required of a world-class soloist. It wasn't a minor injury. It was a physical necessity that curtailed her performing future.
You have to imagine being at the pinnacle of the performing world and realizing your body it couldn't sustain it.
And the sources don't dwell on the emotional toll, but the strategic outcome is crystal clear. Instead of allowing this diagnosis to end her career, de Valois channeled her immense ambition and her newly acquired organizational knowledge.
The Diaghilev blueprint.
The Diaghilev blueprint toward choreography and, more importantly, direction and institutional founding.
If she couldn't dance the future of ballet on the world stage, she was absolutely determined to build the platform upon which the next 100 years of British ballet would stand.
This forced pivot turned a brilliant dancer into an unstoppable architect. The urgency she showed immediately afterward, establishing institutions almost overnight, confirms that she had found a new, necessary outlet for her energy.
The speed of her transition is it's remarkable. She leaves Ballets Russes in 1926, armed with the organizational blueprint, constrained physically but strategically focused, and by 1927 she immediately sets up not one but two simultaneous national schools.
At the same time.
In London, she established the Academy of Choreographic Art, a rigorous dance school for girls, and concurrently she founded the Abbey Theatre School of Ballet in Dublin.
This duality really highlights the breadth of her ambition and her connection to her Irish roots. The London project was always the main goal, to form a repertory ballet company, sourced entirely from the dancers trained in her school.
And to cultivate a uniquely British style of classical ballet.
Yes, one that could stand as an equal to the Russian and French traditions.
But let's spend a moment on the Dublin project, because it illustrates the geopolitical sensitivity she possessed, which is so crucial to the blueprint's success.
It's a fascinating part of the story.
This project wasn't self-initiated. It was suggested to her by the great poet and playwright W.B. Yeats, the co-founder of the Abbey Theatre, in May 1927 while she was visiting Dublin.
And the timing is critical here. This was newly independent Ireland in the 1920s and 30s. Establishing a national cultural institution was inherently linked to national identity, to political aspiration.
So de Valois wasn't just imposing a foreign art form.
Not at all. She was collaborating with Yeats and others to plant the seed of a national ballet. The project ran until June 1933, and though it was temporary, the sources show its impact was profound.
How significant was it really, given that it was temporary? Was it just a side project?
No, I don't think so. It was a successful proof of concept for her model of training. Of the 16 students in the final class, 7 continued dancing, and most importantly, 2 of those students, Sarah Payne and Joan Denise Moriarty, they went on to found the next major national project, the Abbey School of Ballet.
So she didn't just teach them to dance.
She taught them how to build an institution. She was seeding the future infrastructure of Irish dance, fulfilling her architectural mandate.
And she employed the same cultural integration strategy here that she would later perfect globally. During those years, she actively focused on commissioning music from Irish contemporary composers for her choreographic works. She used Harold R. White's The Faun in 1928, and later Arthur Duff's The Drinking Horn and John F. Larcher's Bluebeard in 1933.
She was ensuring that the new art form was intertwined with native music and cultural narratives right from the very beginning. It's incredibly smart.
Meanwhile, the groundwork for the permanent institution in London required a different kind of strategic patronage. Students from her Academy of Choreographic Art gained necessary, invaluable professional stage experience performing in operas and plays at the Old Vic.
And de Valois herself choreographed short ballets specifically designed to showcase her students.
This is where Lillian Bayliss enters the story, the theatrical manager who owned the Old Vic.
A powerhouse in her own right.
Definitely. She was driven by this desire to bring serious drama and opera to a wider working-class audience.
So Bayliss was the infrastructure provider, and de Valois was the content expert. Bayliss acquired and refurbished the derelict Sadler's Wells Theater, intending it to be a sister theater to the Old Vic, specifically for opera and dance.
And this gave de Valois the permanent, dedicated home she needed to scale her vision beyond just a small academy.
Exactly. So when Sadler's Wells reopened in 1931, the picket was complete. De Valois moved her school there, renaming it the Sadler's Wells Ballet School. The accompanying permanent company was formally founded at that moment, the Vic Wells Ballet.
And this simultaneous founding of the permanent school and the permanent company is the true moment of origin for the entire Royal Ballet organization.
It is. And it's crucial to understand that her success was predicated on Lillian Baylis's trust and financial support. She successfully convinced a major patron that dance, as a serious art form, deserved its own home, separate from being merely an adornment for opera.
That ability to secure critical infrastructure is perhaps the first great structural win of her blueprint.
I think you're right.
So the Vic Wells Ballet, the direct ancestor of the Royal Ballet, began life, well, incredibly humbly. When it was formed, the sources indicate it started with only 6 female dancers, just 6. And de Valois was still trying to work as the lead dancer, choreographer, and director.
It was a hand-to-mouth operation driven purely by her iron will.
Their first major production on May 5th, 1931, at the Old Vic, was a statement of intent, even with those humble resources.
Right. They brought in external talent, Anton Dolan, as a guest star to inject immediate star power and legitimacy. But the moment de Valois truly formalized the shift from dancer to director came 2 years later.
In 1933, she successfully secured Alicia Markova, her former Ballets Russes protege, to join the company. And she appointed her as prima ballerina.
A huge recruitment coup.
Massive. And following this, de Valois retired fully from the stage herself.
That decision is textbook institutional strategy. She realized the company needed world-class performing talent to thrive, and she had to step away entirely to dedicate her time to management and creation.
So by retiring, she sent a clear signal.
A very clear signal that the company was no longer dependent on her physical performance. It was dependent on her administrative and artistic direction.
So she had the school-feeding dancers and a world-class principal leading the company. Now the focus shifted to building the British identity,
which had to be achieved on 2 fronts: the classical foundation and original British modern works.
So in the short term, throughout the 1930s, the company flourished by performing the classical ballet repertoire works like Swan Lake, Giselle, and The Sleeping Beauty.
Works made famous by the Imperial Russian Ballet. And this was strategically essential. You can't define a new national style unless your dancers possess a world-class classical technique capable of executing the existing global standards.
They had to earn their credibility first.
Exactly. But the truly strategic, forward-looking step, the signature move of the de Valois blueprint, was establishing a pipeline for a distinct British repertory. She knew that simply performing Russian classics would leave them perpetually derivative.
To forge that unique style, she engaged the crucial artistic triumvirate in 1935.
Yes. Frederick Ashton as principal choreographer and Constant Lambert as musical director. This trio de Valois providing the structural architecture, Lambert the musical vision, and Ashton the choreographic voice. This guaranteed a distinctly British artistic identity that could finally move beyond imitation.
And the success of this system is so evident in the talent that flowed from the school and into the company. It became a star-making factory.
It really did, nurturing dancers who would become global icons. Margot Fonteyn, Robert Helpman, Moira Shearer, Beryl Gray, Michael Soames.
De Valois built the system, and the system produced the legends.
And the ultimate external validation of this system occurred in 1949. The sources all highlight the 1949 U.S. tour sensation.
Right. The Sadler's-Wells Ballet toured the United States, and the immediate, overwhelming success of Margot Fonteyn made her an instant, massive, international celebrity.
That moment wasn't just a successful tour. It was a cultural, diplomatic triumph. Post-war Britain had proved that it had not only rebuilt, but had created a world-class, exportable art form.
It confirmed, decades after her vision began, that her system for training, management, and commissioning new work had resulted in a world-class powerhouse capable of generating international sensations.
And it also showed her commercial acumen. She knew that Fonteyn, in particular, was the face that could sell the entire company to a global audience. It was a strategic intersection of high art and high profile.
But she wasn't only the visionary director commissioning work, she was also an exceptional choreographer herself, which brings us to her single most important early creation.
One that solidified the British style right from the start.
Let's dedicate some time to Job, which premiered in 1931.
Yes, it was her first major production for the Vic Wells Ballet, and its significance is it's profound. The sources confirm it literally defined the future aesthetic of the British ballet repertoire.
Its historical importance cannot be overstated. Job remains the oldest ballet still actively performed in the Royal Ballet repertoire. And crucially for her national vision, it was the first full-length ballet produced by an entirely British creative team.
She was creating a British statement culturally and artistically, just as the company was taking its first steps.
And that British creative team was meticulously chosen to ensure cultural resonance.
Absolutely. The sources detail the dedication to using native talent. The score, titled Job, A Mask for Dancing, was commissioned from the monumental British composer Ralph Vaughan Williams.
It was orchestrated by her musical director, Constant Lambert, and the designs were handled by Gwendolyn Reverott.
And the source material for the libretto was profoundly unique in the ballet world. It was written by Geoffrey Keynes, based on William Blake's famous engraved edition of the Book of Job from the Hebrew Bible.
So why was using Blake in the Book of Job so significant for this nascent British style?
Well, it was a conscious rejection of the popular Ballets Russes aesthetic. Diaghilev often leaned towards Russian exoticism, Orientalism, or bright modern colors. De Valois went for something reserved, weighty, profoundly intellectual, and based in the Protestant tradition.
So it was seeking to explore moral allegory and high drama rather than just sensational spectacle.
That's it exactly.
So how did that intellectual source material translate into her actual choreographic style? The sources describe it as having a simple, decorative effect using mimed actions. That sounds a bit simplistic for a major work.
The term mimed actions here isn't simple in the sense of crude. It's simple in the sense of stylized, clear, dramatic intent. De Valois structured the work into 8 scenes, directly inspired by the static poses and powerful gestures of Blake's engravings.
So the choreography was less about virtuoso steps.
And more about conveying theological and narrative meaning through powerful, defined poses and tableaux. It linked the visual, the literary, and the musical arts in a deeply narrative and expressionist way, setting a tone of dramatic weight for the emerging British repertoire.
That makes sense. It established a tone of English reserve and dramatic seriousness that contrasted sharply with continental flashiness.
Precisely. And while the overall tone was reserved, it contained moments of powerful dramatic dance that are still performed as classics today. The sources highlight Satan's dance, an acrobatic solo for a male dancer that requires incredible power.
The stylized dance of Job's comforters, and the satirical expressionist dances representing the destructive forces of war, pestilence, and famine.
Right. These extracts show her capability for both dramatic subtlety and powerful physical expression.
And just for those tracking the timeline, the world premiere was for the Camardo Society on July 5, 1931, followed quickly by the first public performance on September 20, 1931 at the Old Vic.
A clear, confident statement of national intent just months after the company's formal founding.
And this commitment to defining the British voice continued throughout the 1930s. Her genius was not just in her own work, but in her partnership with Ashton.
Yes, she ensured the company quickly amassed a signature British repertory. Their collaborations resulted in crucial cornerstones of British ballet, including the famous Hogarthian satire The Rake's Progress in 1935.
And the dramatic psychological thriller Checkmate in 1937.
She was a factory of creation, filling the repertoire while simultaneously managing the entire institutional structure. To briefly round out her extensive output during those formative years, we should mention The Haunted Ballroom, The Prospect Before Us, and of course the later works she created specifically for the Turkish stage.
Her ability to maintain this level of creative output while also being the administrative head is, well, it's unprecedented. That relentless work ethic, combined with decades of artistic success, finally culminated in the ultimate institutional security. In 1956, the company and school were granted a royal charter by Queen Elizabeth II.
Formally linking the two organizations under the official patronage of the Crown, this was the ultimate realization of the blueprint's goal, sustainability.
So the change wasn't just aesthetic.
Not at all.
Right.
It fundamentally changed the funding and perceived status of the company. The Vic Wells Ballet became the Royal Ballet. De Valois had successfully elevated the performing art from a niche activity into a recognized, permanently institutionally backed component of British national culture.
And this stability immediately paid dividends in terms of securing future talent flow, which was the core structural strength of her model.
Right. She ensured the company maintained a constant supply of stars trained entirely within her school's synthesized British technique.
I mean, think of the incredible roster. Svetlana Borisova, Antoinette Sibley, Nadia Norina, Lynn Seymour.
And she proved her strategic vision was not insular by integrating global talent, like the explosive arrival of Rudolf Nureyev in the 1960s. She knew the institution needed both a homegrown foundation and the electrifying international star power.
Critically, she also demonstrated a lack of artistic defensiveness. She didn't just rely on Ashton and her own work, did she?
No, she actively invited external world-class choreographers to enrich the repertoire. The sources specifically note that she invited the highly modern Sir Kenneth Macmillan and the ultimate master of neoclassicism, George Balanchine, to work with the company.
This is a perfect example of adaptive strategy. She was committed to her unique British style, but not so dogmatic that she closed off the institution to necessary evolution.
She provided the stability so that great artists felt secure enough to create daring new work.
Her formal, direct involvement began to wind down in the early 1960s. She formally retired from the Royal Ballet directorship in 1963 and from the school in 1970.
But the sources emphasize that she remained the unofficial, looming matriarch. Her presence continued to exert enormous influence over the institutions for decades, ensuring that the founding principles were never forgotten.
Okay, now let's turn our attention to the second major triumph of her institutional blueprint, one that confirms its portability and universal effectiveness, the establishment of the Turkish State Ballet.
This project is perhaps even more remarkable than the Royal Ballet's founding.
Why do you say that?
Because Turkey, at the time she became involved, had no prior history whatsoever with the classical art form. The Turkish government, driven by Ataturk's secular modernizing reforms, invited her in the late 1940s to establish a ballet school.
What were the risks and challenges of essentially importing an entire cultural tradition wholesale into a country where it had no roots?
Well, the sources suggest that initial institutional skepticism was high, and few people took the project seriously. The challenge was immense. Not only did she need to establish a school, but she had to convince the public and the government that this was a legitimate, worthy national art form.
She opened the school in 1947, modeling it exactly on her successful Sadler's Wells template in London.
And the model eventually stabilized under the direction of her appointed staff. The sources mention Molly Lake and Travis Kemp, who took over the running of the school from 1954 at de Valois' request, leading directly to the formation of the Turkish State Ballet.
And her commitment to ensuring this new institution thrived was total.
Absolutely. She acted as a vital cultural bridge, permitting Royal Ballet stars, including Fontaine, Michael Soames, and Nadia Norina, to perform in Ankara as guest artists. This instantly lent immense international prestige and credibility to the nascent company.
She mounted all the great traditional classical works, Coppelia, Giselle, Swan Lake, The Nutcracker, along with her own ballets like Checkmate and The Rake's Progress.
But the ultimate success, the defining feature of the localized blueprint, was the integration of national culture. This is the moment where the strategic genius she first tested in Dublin came to full fruition.
In 1965.
In 1965, de Valois choreographed and produced the first full-length work created specifically for the Turkish State Ballet.
That work was Shmebaşı, or At the Fountain?
Correct. And it was meticulously designed to put down national roots. It was the first ballet to feature music composed entirely by a Turkish composer, Ferit Tuzun. And crucially, the choreography incorporated elements of Turkish folk dance.
She understood that for ballet to survive and be claimed as a national possession, it had to integrate native cultural material.
She successfully grafted a European art form onto Turkish cultural soil.
And the legacy is undeniable. The school she established is now fully integrated into the State Conservatory for Music and Drama at the Ankara State Conservatory.
She didn't just start a project that eventually closed. She embedded a permanent, self-sustaining educational and cultural system into a sovereign nation. She truly exported her blueprint successfully.
It's remarkable. Now, despite her life being so public and professionally intense, de Valois rigorously maintained a clear separation from her private life.
Very clear. In 1935, she married Dr. Arthur Blackhall Connell, a physician and surgeon working as a GP in Barnes, London, where they made their home. She was his second wife.
The union was childless, but she gained 2 stepsons. However, for all her organizational output, the sources note that in her extensive autobiographical writings, she made only the most fleeting, brief references to her marriage.
This reinforces the idea that the persona of Ninette de Valois was entirely dedicated to the institution, and her private life was deliberately shielded from the narrative.
Yet, while we kept her private life small, her public recognition grew to an astonishing, almost unprecedented scale.
The sheer volume and escalation of major international and national honors she received over 8 decades confirms her status not just as a great artist, but as a foundational historical figure.
Let's contextualize these honors, because just listing them doesn't capture the weight they carry. Her British honors alone tell a story of escalating national recognition. Starting as Commander of the Order of the British Empire, CBE, in 1947.
She was quickly promoted to Dame Commander, DBE, in 1951, making her Dame Ninette.
Then came the truly exclusive recognitions. She was appointed a member of the Order of the Companions of Honor, CH, in 1981, which is a rare honor recognizing service of national importance.
And finally, the capstone honor, the Order of Merit, OM, in 1992, personally awarded by the Queen. The Order of Merit is limited to only 24 living individuals at any one time.
That distinction confirms the architectural nature of her achievement, doesn't it? She wasn't just recognized for her career, but for fundamentally altering the cultural landscape.
And this recognition was echoed globally by the institutions she helped build. She was appointed a Knight of France's Legion of Honor in 1950 and received the Order of Merit of the Republic of Turkey in 1998.
A direct acknowledgement from the nation whose ballet tradition she created from scratch.
And she collected virtually every major arts and academic accolade imaginable, including the Albert Medal in 1964 and the prestigious Erasmus Prize in 1974. The academic accolades are particularly telling. Doctor of Music from London, Sheffield, and Dublin, and Doctor of Letters from Reading, Oxford, and Ulster.
These honorary degrees prove that the educational model she established, combining rigorous practical training with serious artistic and historical knowledge, was recognized by the highest levels of academia as a legitimate field of study.
She established credibility for ballet, not just on the stage, but in the lecture hall.
And to inject that humanizing detail into this story of relentless discipline, we have to come back to her 1991 appearance on BBC Radio 4's Desert Island Discs.
She was sharp, witty, and deeply philosophical. She selected a collection of poems for her book, reflecting her intellectual curiosity. But the choice of her luxury item is priceless.
An everlasting bottle of sleeping pills. That's the perfect detail. It suggests perhaps a touch of necessary self-medication for someone who, as we have seen, clearly carried the mental weight of national culture on her shoulders for nearly 50 years.
The architect of institutions sometimes needs to turn off the blueprint at night.
Her longevity was just as remarkable as her success. She continued to make public appearances and remain connected to the dance world until her death in London on March 8, 2001, at the age of 102.
And finally, her connection to her homeland never faded. She acted as a patron and supporter for the Cork Ballet Company and the Irish National Ballet Company throughout her later life.
It's fitting that since 2018, the annual Ninette de Valois Festival of Dance has been held in her hometown of Blessington, County Wicklow, ensuring that her Irish origins are celebrated alongside her global achievements.
So, if we look back at the immense body of work, from a handful of dancers in 1931 to two globally recognized national institutions, what is the definitive summary of the de Valois blueprint?
I think you could boil it down.
It rests on three non-negotiable pillars.
Yeah.
First, securing the necessary infrastructure and institutional recognition, which was the Royal Charter. Second, establishing a perpetual flow of highly trained talent, the Royal Ballet School model.
And third,
maintaining a strategic link between classical repertoire and distinct national cultural identity, Ashton, Lambert, and the incorporation of folk dance in Turkey.
She achieved the strategic impossible. She transformed ballet in the UK and then replicated that feat in Turkey, turning it from a mere performing art into a sustainable, institutionally backed component of national culture.
She was the ultimate visionary director who ensured the supply of talent would never run dry.
And for anyone who wants to study her philosophy directly, she left behind her manual. Her written works provide incredible insight into how she executed that blueprint.
Yes. Invitation to the Ballet from 1937, Come Dance With Me, a memoir, 1898-1956, and the wonderfully titled Step by Step, The Formation of an Establishment from 1977. She literally wrote the book on how to build a cultural establishment.
So here's where it gets really interesting, connecting her legacy to the contemporary landscape. De Valois' success was entirely defined by securing institutional permanence and ensuring a constant supply of talent trained in a uniquely British style. She was focused on national identity and stability. So, given the permanence she created, what is the ongoing challenge for institutions like the Royal Ballet today? Is their primary mission maintaining that foundational, historically derived vision of a distinct British style? or is the greatest strategic imperative adapting to a continually evolving, borderless global dance landscape where techniques, styles, and talent merge constantly across international companies?
That is something to mull over the next time you see a spotlight hit the stage. Is it a monument to history or a beacon for the future.
An excellent thought to end on, highlighting the pressure all foundational institutions face today. Thank you for joining us for this deep dive into the architectural genius of Dame Ninette de Valois.
We'll catch you next time for the next deep dive.